Hi everyone, it's Jonette, your favorite 4-H agent. In today's Health Rocks lesson, I would like to discuss the electronic cigarette, or the e-cigarette. A lot of people call it a vape, and people who use them are known as vapors. The act of smoking a vape is known as vaping. There are many myths surrounding vaping, and oftentimes when I deliver this program to youth, I get bombarded with lots of questions and these same myths and misconceptions about vaping. Some of those statements that get said to me is that a vape is safe, that the cloud that is produced from vape is nothing more than water vapor, and that it is the safe thing to do and that there's no risk involved with vaping because it's just water and juice. Now you understand the need for this particular lesson on vaping. As you know, vaping has only been marketed for about 15 years. So there's not a lot of data to go on about vaping. However, in those 15 years, there have been plenty of documented cases about vapors who have suffered critical, irreversible lung damage, nicotine poisoning, and death. But the National Institute of Health, as well as the American Lung Association, require at least 20 years of data results in order to properly study the long-term effects that vaping has on a person's lung and overall health. Even though there's only 15 years worth of data about vaping, there are very solid scientific facts of what happens during the chemical reaction produced during the process of vaping. The harmful chemicals produced while vaping have proven to be both harmful to the vapor and to those who are exposed to this aerosol vape cloud. To get to the truth of the matter about vaping, we have to dive into some very basic chemistry. But don't get afraid because I use the word chemistry. We're going to take what you know about chemicals and chemical reactions and atoms and apply that to understanding exactly what is vaping. So here's what we all need to know. Number one, all things are made up of matter. Number two, all matter is made up of tiny particles called atoms. Number three, atoms are made up of even tinier particles called protons, electrons, and neutrons. According to how many electrons, protons, and neutrons an atom has determines exactly what that particular element is. Number four, all elements are numbered and included on the periodic table of elements. The periodic table of elements includes all elements together according to their number and groups them by categories. Number five, elements can be combined or bonded together to form various types of matter. Chemists study these bonds and research and experiment with different elements that can be grouped together or bound together to create new substances that we use in our everyday life. Number six, when we combine multiple atoms together, we create molecules. A molecule is created when we combine two or more atoms together in order to form a different substance. A molecule is the smallest component in a chemical compound. So what do we know about matter? There are three different possible states of matter. We have solids, liquids, and gases. And we know that we can move from a solid to a liquid to a gas by either adding energy or taking energy away from that. And when we talk about adding energy, we're talking about adding heat energy. And when we talk about subtracting energy, we're talking about cold, making a substance colder. So the best way to understand this is to use water. Very simple, very easy, and water can move between a solid, a liquid, and a gas very easily by adding and subtracting heat. So here in my tea kettle, I'm going to place it on the stove there that is nice and hot, and we're going to heat that up and take a look at the gaseous state of water known as water vapor. As you see, our tea kettle is all steamed up. That water that's inside is whistling as it comes through the spout of my tea kettle, transforming the water inside back into its original properties of hydrogen and oxygen, which is in the vapor that you see surrounding the tea kettle. Once it is in the air, it cools down, and those atoms bond back together again and form water. We know this is condensation, and then that water vapor turns right back into water. We have 2 hydrogen to 1 oxygen, H2O. When they are bonded together, we get water. When we add energy and heat that up, then in the air, the hydrogen gas and the oxygen gas separate from each other and exist in the air. Once they cool down in the air, condensation occurs, and those atoms want to be together. They bond back together again in the condensation, forming water molecules that we see drip down into water in its original state. And it is very nice to be able to turn on our faucet and have water. And we know everybody has to have water, and it is recommended that you drink it every day. But what about water in its solid form? Water in its solid form is ice. In all 3 states, we still have water. So there has been no chemical change. What we have experienced is called a physical change. Physical changes are changes in which the form of the matter is altered, but we do not have the creation of a new substance, or one substance is not transformed into another. To help me illustrate this, we're going to use my melting snowman. Meet the melting snowman. The melting snowman is nothing more than silly putty. Silly putty will flow, but it flows very, very slowly. So if we add heat to silly putty will become more like the fluid that you are more familiar with. If we were to put silly putty in the refrigerator, it would hold its shape. If we put it in the freezer, then it becomes a solid. But if we leave silly putty at room temperature, then it will begin to melt, so to speak, but it will always remain silly putty. So silly putty, in essence, is a lot like water. In its liquid form, it's H2O. In its frozen form, it is still H2O. Water vapor is still 2 parts hydrogen, 1 part oxygen. When it condenses back to room temperature or cools down from its boiling point, we once again have H2O, kind of like silly putty, except silly putty is a non-Newtonian fluid. So let's see what happens to silly putty when we allow silly putty to flow. Let's see if it undergoes a chemical change or if it undergoes a physical change. The silly putty changes shape And the size of the snowman changes, but it remains silly putty. And I can keep building the snowman over and over again. Water and silly putty are examples of physical change. A chemical change occurs when one substance combines with another in order to form a brand new substance. For demonstration purposes, we are going to make a carbon snake. I have two different ways to experiment. One requires fire and the other requires sulfuric acid. Both of these experiments should not be attempted at home by you unless you have a responsible adult assisting you. Please make sure you have the proper safety equipment if you are going to attempt this experiment. You are going to need eye protection. You want to protect your nose, your mouth, as well as your lungs and your throat during this process. So have something to protect your breathing. You are also going to need gloves because sulfuric acid can burn if it makes contact with your skin. So let's get started. We're doing this experiment outside because toxic fumes can be produced during this process. You can fill your mason jar, depending on the size of it, 1/3 to half full of sugar. Add your sulfuric acid, stand back and watch the results. As the sulfuric acid begins to break down the sugar molecules, you will notice a very distinct color change. The sugar changes from white to brown to black. As the sulfuric acid begins to break down the molecules of sugar, you will also notice a sizzling or bubbling sound occurring from your mixture as heat is being produced in this chemical reaction. Be very careful about inhaling this because even though there are water molecules in this precipitate, there also is acid in there. So you do not want to directly inhale that cloud. Inside this metal pan, put a mound of sand. Make a small depression in the sand. Next, I'm going to pour my alcohol over the sand mixture. In my mason jar, I have mixed together 3 parts sugar to 1 part baking soda. I'm going to pour this mixture into the indentation that I made in my mound of sand. Light the mixture using the grill lighter. Stand by and watch your snake grow. When a chemical change occurs, you should expect to see gas bubbles, formation of a precipitate, color change, temperature change, production of light, change in volume, and a change to the smell or taste. What we saw in our 2 experiments are clear indicators that a chemical reaction occurred. That means that our sugar and our baking soda underwent a complete chemical change. We may have begun with baking soda and sugar, but in the end, we have a completely new substance. And now let's take what we just learned about physical and chemical changes and apply that to vaping. Vaping requires a liquid substance referred to as vape juice or e-juice. Vape juice is a mixture of chemical components that make up the solution. The ingredients found in vape juice are much more complicated than simply mixing vegetable oil and olive oil. In fact, according to the American Lung Association, as of April 19th, 2020, the Food and Drug Administration, commonly referred to as the FDA, has not begun its review of any e-cigarette or its ingredients, nor has the FDA issued any standards on the products. E-cigarette composition and effects will vary. What researchers do know is that toxic chemicals and metals have all been found in e-cigarettes. So then, where's it coming from? Let's first take a look at what is actually in vape juice. Vape juice often uses propylene glycol or vegetable glycerin as the basis of its juice. Also mixed into that propylene glycol and vegetable glycerin is going to be nicotine at a variety of concentrations and flavoring. Flavorings can either be natural flavoring, artificial flavoring, or a combination of both. It is important to know that studies have also found that e-juice that claims to be nicotine-free still has trace amounts of nicotine. When the e-liquid is heated up, there are more toxic chemicals produced after that chemical reaction. Well, what's starting the chemical reaction? In our review of our chemistry lesson and in the experiments that we just conducted, we learned that in a chemical reaction, we begin with one substance, we end with something completely different. In order for a chemical reaction to occur, we have to have the addition of heat. You have your vape juice, a metal heating coil, and you also have your filter. The chemical change occurs when the battery heats the heating coil, which is metal. There are also chemicals in the filter. That filter, every time it is heated up, is also undergoing a chemical change. Your vape juice is being heated up, which means those molecules are changing from the liquid form to a gaseous form. So, much like smoking a tobacco cigarette, when those substances undergo a chemical change, we get the creation and the formation of other chemicals. Those other chemicals are what the vapor breathes into their lungs and then breathes out into this aerosol cloud that has tiny particles of metal and other harmful chemicals suspended in the air, which means that aerosol cloud has a dangerous mixture of toxic chemicals and metals, dangerous for the vapor and for anyone exposed to that cloud. To help understand further the effects of vaping, we're going to have an interview, a little conversation with a friend of mine named Patricia. Patricia has been vaping for 5 years, and she's also going to demonstrate to us how the vape works. We are here in the home of a good friend of mine. Her name is Patricia Leftwich, and we will be joined by her daughter, Ashley, who is going to talk to us a little bit more about the chemistry of vaping and the impacts that vaping has on people who vape. Hey, Patricia,
Hello.
Ashley.
Hi.
Thank you very much for doing this video with me. I really do appreciate it.
Yeah, we're excited.
Let's begin with you, Patricia. So are you currently a vapor?
Yes, I am.
Now, have you ever smoked a tobacco cigarette?
I did. I smoked cigarettes for about 20 years before I switched to vaping. I switched to vaping about 5 years ago.
Now, what made you switch to vaping?
Well, I thought that it was going to be a healthier alternative. There wasn't a lot of research on vaping at the time. You didn't hear the horror stories like you do now. So I really and truly thought it was just an alternative. I wanted to get away from the cigarettes because they, my teeth were looking yellow. I stunk. Like when I would smoke a cigarette, it just stunk.
She smelled bad, Ashley?
She didn't smell too great.
And so I wanted to get away from all of that. When you smoke, it's in your hair, it's on your clothes. You cannot get rid. You can't just go wash your hands and get that smell off. So for those reasons, I wanted to find a different alternative At the time, I wasn't thinking about quitting. I was just thinking about switching. So,
Okay, so now that you have been a 5-year vapor,
yes.
do you think that vaping would ever help you to quit smoking?
No. No, I do not. If so, I wouldn't have been vaping for 5 years. So,
Okay.
no, I do not.
All right, now do you use flavored vape juice?
I do. I do use the flavored vape juice.
Do you plan to stop smoking?
Yes, I do.
What plan have you put into place to help you quit smoking?
Well, if you're not familiar with vapes, which, you've been studying up on them, I know you are, but there's different levels of nicotine. And so I've been going down on my levels of nicotine to kind of wean myself off of it. Right now I'm at a 3.
Okay, so how do you measure that?
You have to buy in the bottle. You have to tell them when you go to buy it what level of nicotine you want. I think they start out at like 24 milligrams or however they measure it. And then it goes down.
Okay.
So I'm currently at a 3.
So when you were at your highest level, how high of a nicotine concentration did you
I was
start?
at a 12.
And now you're down to a 3.
Yes.
So you're making progress.
Yes.
Congratulations. I'm very
you.
proud of you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you
I know
very
you
much.
are because you fuss at me.
Well, I care about your health, Patricia.
I appreciate it.
Yes. How has the COVID-19 and coronavirus impacted your thoughts on smoking and vaping?
Well, it has really concerned me because my lungs are not what they used to be. Because I have been a smoker and a vapor. And I know that if I were to get the virus, I would not be able to fight it off as well as someone who has not smoked or vaped. They have stressed how it attacks your lungs. And so that concerns me.
Now, you smoked cigarettes for 20 years.
Yes.
And then you switched to vaping, and
Yes.
you've been vaping for only 5 years.
Yes.
So have you experienced any side effects as a result of smoking versus vaping or vaping versus smoking? Or what have you felt?
Okay, well, the good thing about it has been I don't have that nasty smell. But that's the only good thing about it. I can tell a big difference in my lungs. I have a harder time breathing since I started vaping. I had a hard enough time breathing when I was smoking cigarettes. Since I switched to vaping, the vaping seems to have made it a lot worse, a lot quicker. So that concerns me.
Can you give us any examples?
Okay. So, well, when I used to smoke, I couldn't walk from the bottom of my yard to the top of my yard without huffing and puffing and, I got to catch my breath. And now I probably couldn't walk halfway through it without stopping to catch my breath.
Wow.
Because it's just, it has gotten that much worse. That concerns me, and that's why I need to get off of the vape, and that's why I have been going down on my nicotine level to try to wean myself off of it. Not only am I having trouble with my lungs, it irritates my throat. It has caused memory loss. It'll remind you of when you're pregnant and you have that memory loss.
Like forgetfulness?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Just having a hard time remembering things.
Okay.
So yeah, those things concern me, and I'm ready to quit vaping. So.
Can you show us some of the devices that you use and explain to us the process of how these electronic nicotine delivery systems work? People call them Juuls, which is just a different type of one, a vape, but an electronic cigarette. They're pretty much all the same.
Sure. This is what they call a vape pen, and it's 2 different pieces. You have the vape battery, and then you have the juice tank. Okay? So if you wanted to put your juice in there, you will unscrew the top, take that off. You'll put your juice down in here. And what it does, and you probably can't see it very well, but there's a filter down in here where the juice goes. So you put the juice down in there, put your lid back on. Okay, and then you're going to screw this piece into the battery. Okay. The reason for that is because when you push this button, it's actually going to heat up your juice and the coil. If you can see the coil in there, it's going to heat that up. And that coil acts as like a wick. And so it will pull the juice up through the coil, and then as you puff it, it'll pull the juice up through the coil, and that's how you get the vape. Or the vapor. But if you can get a good look at mine, do you see how black the juice is?
Yes.
Okay. Well, that's not the color that the juice was going in. This is the color it was. It gets black like that because it's so heated up. Okay? Yes.
So it's not just the chemical in the juice, it's also whatever the chemical makeup of the filter or that wick is inside.
Yes, and so after using this for, it usually takes me a couple of months. I don't use my vape pen quite as much as some people do, but so it usually takes me a couple months. But after this has been heated so many times, it will actually taste burnt when I take a puff of it.
So how many ounces or milliliters does that particular device hold?
This one holds 1.6 milliliters.
And how long would it take you to finish that entire cartridge?
It would take me about a week. If you're using one of these, which is a tank, I believe is what they call it. This is the mouthpiece, yes.
Okay.
And so you'll put your vape juice in there, shut that, and when it goes down in there, it's going down in this tank, okay? And there's a filter in there as well. Does the exact same thing as this one does. Heats up, creates the vapor. When you push on the...
Oh, it sounds like it's steaming,
yes,
crackling,
yes.
hot heat.
This is one that makes the big smoke clouds. This is the one the teenagers like because it's making the big vape clouds. And so the thing is, it's getting so hot when they're doing that. This is a much bigger one. These scare me because they are so big and they do heat so high. And these are the ones that you see that explode on people.
Okay, are the big tank
yes, or the tank
style.
Yes. Not to say that these wouldn't explode. I haven't seen a lot of studies done on that, but I have seen them on this. I've seen pictures on Facebook, warnings saying don't, use these tanks. But so anyway, but that's the setup of each one of those.
So Ashley, let's talk to you now. How about you tell us a little bit about your occupation?
I'm a cosmetologist. I cut, color, and perm hair, and I do facial waxing.
How much chemistry is involved in cosmetology?
A lot. It involves a lot more than you would think. Because your hair has a lot more chemicals than what people think it does. So you have to make sure that the chemicals you're using are compatible with the chemicals that are already in the hair.
How does smoking and vaping affect you as a hairdresser?
Sometimes it can make the coloring jobs a little bit harder. Sometimes the colors don't turn out quite like they thought it would.
Wow. So when clients come into the salon and they're asking you for a service and they get something different, they always like to blame the hairdresser, but it's really not the hairdresser's fault if they don't disclose certain information.
Yes, exactly. And most of the time it's usually that they've lied about the history of their hair. So whether they've, smoked and not told us, or colored their hair with different dyes and not told us, or so it's always good to be honest with your stylist.
I would have to agree with you on that one. What would be the long-term effects for someone's hair if they, continue to vape or smoke?
Well, it can actually cause thinning of the hair. It can cause your hair to thin. It can cause it to be hard to get any type of chemical services done. It can cause breakage in the hair.
Wow. Well, thank you very much for sharing your experiences with us. And we truly support you, Patricia, in your, journey to quit vaping. Ashley, thank you for sharing with us that chemistry, lesson about how that affects hair and beauty and the services that we get.
Oh yeah, it's my pleasure.
The toxic and poisonous chemicals produced when smoking cigarettes and vaping affects a person inside and out, thus robbing the body of key elements that keep it healthy and healthy looking, proving beauty is more than skin deep. So can you spot the smoker in these photos? I hope this has answered your questions about vaping and maybe even addressed some of the other things that you didn't understand about the vaping process. The bottom line, vaping is not a healthier alternative to smoking a tobacco cigarette. Our lungs are a very important organ to our body. It is the only organ responsible for bringing in oxygen into our body and getting rid of the carbon dioxide in our respiration and aerobic processes. If you damage your lungs, it can be critical in helping you to sustain your life. So in the end, don't pick up a habit of smoking or vaping that is going to cause you irreversible lung damage. And if you have started, now is a great time to quit. Thank you for watching and staying tuned in to this very important lesson on vaping. I am your favorite 4-H agent, Jonette, saying stay healthy, stay happy, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.